Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys just briefly because it's stuff that kind of came up a little bit yesterday in my Michelle Obama potato video. And one of the big questions that I think is important in the fitness world, we really address, those of us in the fitness community, people who understand nutrition, fitness, these other issues, we really kind of take a stance, a public stance on steps that need to be made in the US and now spreading across the world as the American diet spreads across the rest of the world, but the Western diet in general, of how do we deal with this massively increasing obesity epidemic and diabetes epidemic and everything else, these cardiovascular disease, cancer, all these things tie back in together. And if people are obese, they massively predispose themselves to these other things. There is a direct correlation between them. But how do we end these things? And I think high on the list needs to be education for the young, because this current generation of adults have essentially put forward this I don't give a fuck attitude. They really don't care. They just want quick fixes. They're lazy. They have no clue about nutrition in spite of the fact that all of the information in the world is out there, that yet they choose to do fad diets and little silly fluffy exercise programs that don't work. And they ignore the whole host of information out there with the internet out there today and tons of legitimate experts putting out information. There's no excuse for ignorance in adults. They just choose not to learn it. All right, Aries, you got to get off my desk. And Aries is, of course, bulking up. As you guys can see, I've got him bulking right now. We're going to put him back down here. He doesn't need to be on my desk. But education of the children is the biggest thing. And I think, first of all, we have to get children active again. And people say, oh, it's not, these aren't the school's responsibility. It's not society's responsibility. It is. Because you're the ones who are going to be paying taxes for all the medical care of these people. You're the ones who are going to be paying for all of this. So you might as well expend the resources to cut the costs down now rather than pay them in the future. And that's just my opinion as someone telling you people as taxpayers, you better pay attention to this stuff at this point. And it is society's problem at this point because the parents are failing. You have a generation of fat, lazy parents who have no concept of basic nutrition, basic exercise, and they're passing it on to their children. So yes, we as a society have an interest in educating these children so that they can make educated choices as they get older, rather than fall back into the same pattern that they've been taught. Give them the tools to make the choices, and that requires education, which means we need to return to physical education in schools. It needs to be mandatory. A minimum of 30 minutes of PE and exercise in school again for all children, starting from kindergarten all the way up till they graduate from high school. We need better food programs. That means the school lunches, they need to be taught to eat foods and learn to acquire a taste for things that taste better. These snack machines need to be removed. The vending machines with the sodas need to be removed. And a lot of schools have successfully done this, but they're the minority. Other schools have put forward programs that I've seen to where they've shown that they can cook far, far healthier, micronutrient dense, higher satiation, better diets with more whole ingredients, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, things like that. Less fat, less fried foods for the same cost as what's being done in a lot of these other schools, the mainstream schools. So there have been public schools who have started lunch programs to do this. We need better nutrition education in schools. And I don't mean this quack stuff just because there's some quacks who come out and come up with new diets that we need to throw away the food pyramid and grains and all of that. That's nonsense. We know that societies that live on whole grains are leaner than societies that do not, and that they have lower rates of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all these other things. It's shown over and over and over. So there is no correlation between eating grains and these problems. There's a correlation between large amounts of fat in your diet, large amounts of saturated fat in your diet, large amounts of processed sugars in your diet, and just heavily refined carbohydrates and heavily refined foods in general. That's your sources. So we need to be teaching children proper nutrition education from a young age so that they have the mindset that they need to make the choices rather than just fall into the pattern of their parents. So education is everything. This next generation is critical and we are losing them. Next up on that list, a lot of people want to talk about, well, free business, free business. No. Do you guys know why we have high fructose corn syrup and all these sodas chock full of high fructose corn syrup? Does anybody know? Does anyone honestly think that was a free market that created that? That was a result of poorly chosen government subsidies. Governments have to subsidize business, and that is part of free market economics, believe it or not, because when you have a point to where big business is too big to fail, that it destroys the economy when a big business fails, we reach a point to where we can't afford to let business fail, so we have to subsidize things. However, over subsidization of the corn industry ended up with so much massive amounts of surplus corn at one time that the industry had to come up with all these different ingredients. What can we do to make stuff out of this corn? And that's how they came up with the high fructose corn syrup and put it into mass production. They had to do something with the excess corn. It turned out, with government subsidized corn, it turned out to be cheaper to make than table sugar, and it turned out to be sweeter, so they put it in everything. And now you have more processed fructose than we used to have, and table sugar was already bad enough in the amount that most Americans eat it at. So that was an example of a very poorly chosen government subsidy into a food without looking at the long-term consequences and not pulling the subsidization when we realized there was a problem with it. And that's what we have to do. We have to have governments to stop subsidizing a lot of the processed foods, the junk foods, even a lot of the milk and dairy industry. And I'm sorry, a lot of that is, no matter what you believe, unless you're on the extreme keto kooky end, you don't have to be a vegan like me to realize that excessive amounts of animal fat is contributing to these issues. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole protein debate issue. It's irrelevant at this point. At the very least, people should probably be consuming leaner proteins. And I think even most bodybuilders and people with more extreme views on protein intake would agree with that. We've got to scale back the amount of fat the average person is eating who isn't a serious athlete burning through tons of calories. The satiety is too low on it. It's correlated with too many other medical conditions related to obesity and other problems. So we've got to quit subsidizing some of these industries. We've got to quit subsidizing big dairy. We've got to quit subsidizing red meat and let the market itself dictate how much of those they can buy and sell and set the prices, rather than us pumping tax dollars into making sure that they sell. And we need to be subsidizing fruits, vegetables, whole grains, potatoes, things like that, so that we can get healthier foods that are going to be more micronutrient dense, more filling, that are going to be better for sedentary people who don't have spare calories to spare, so we can get more of these foods into them at a cheaper price. And those are the steps we really need to make. There needs to be education of the children and a complete overhaul of the way that we subsidize the food industry and the agricultural industry. And that's really the steps to solving these problems. And if we don't do this, then I would say this next generation is going to be lost. They're going to be worse than this current one, which is already a disaster. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh.